This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
Welcome back to Justice Pending. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan. And each week we investigate the criminal justice system's many unfinished stories.
Today, we're going back to Austin, Texas, December 6th, 1991. A case that shook the city and still haunts it more than 30 years later.
It's known simply as the Yogurt Shop Murders, an unspeakable crime involving 4 teenage girls, a fire, and a lot of unanswered questions.
Some cases go cold because there's no evidence. Others, like this one, seem to smolder for decades because of what went wrong during the investigation.
In this case, this one went very wrong.
Let's set the scene. It was a Friday night in North Austin. The I Can't Believe It's Yogurt Shop on West Anderson Lane was closing up for the night.
4 teenage girls were inside. 2 of them, 17-year-olds Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison, worked at the shop. Jennifer's younger sister, Sarah, just 15 years old, was there just hanging out, and she brought along her friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers.
So Jennifer and Eliza were scheduled to close the store. Sarah and Amy were planning to get a ride home with them. Normal teenage plans.
But at 11:47 p.m., the fire department was called to the yogurt shop. The building was in flames.
Yes, so this is kind of an incredible connection here, but 48 Hours, the crime show that I worked for at CBS News for like a decade, they were actually filming with the Austin Police Department on that night in 1991.
Wow.
So, yeah, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Susan, but this is like the origin story of why 48 Hours does true crime all the time now. So at the time, they were doing a ride-along with an Austin Police Department officer, and he got the call about a building, being engulfed in flames. And so the cameras are rolling as they approach this yogurt shop, and they realize, it's not just a fire. Once they get inside, the cameras aren't allowed inside, but once firefighters go inside, they make a horrifying discovery. There are 4 bodies. They've been bound, gagged, and left in the back of the shop. Once they, remove them from this active fire, they realize that they've also been shot. And so it's, unbelievable, but the killers had set a fire to cover up the murders. And so, the cameras catch a lot of this action, and then it turns into a story for 48 Hours on the yogurt shop murders that, actually ended up changing the show from just being a documentary show about a variety of topics to being a true crime murder mystery show.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what an origin story. So tragic.
Right?
I noticed that you used the plural version of killers, you said. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear more about that. Because
a lot of times if you have a group murder, people, they go to the idea that it was committed by more than one person, because how do you subdue like 4 people, for example, if you're only one person?
Right.
So yeah, this one is definitely all of the outliers in true crime is really how, I would describe this case. It's the exception to the rules. It's got so many different elements that you just don't normally see. So I mean, let's get into it. This was a brutal crime, and it wasn't considered, random. They didn't think that the the brutality of this and the fact that these 4 teenagers, were tied up and, everything, they felt like this wouldn't be someone who just happened to go into the store, like, to rob it, for example, because this is so over the top, like, what they did, it almost seemed personal.
Yeah, like shock and awe almost.
Right.
And then setting a huge blaze to A, cover it up, but by the way, also draw attention to it pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, once the flames are raising, above the, the building, it's not going to be long before everyone gets called to the scene. And if they hadn't set the building on fire, who knows? Maybe they probably wouldn't have found the victims until the shop opened the next day. So
Right.
actually, yeah, you're right. They brought more immediate law enforcement attention than if they hadn't set the fire.
Yeah. So, okay, let's get into the investigation because that seems to be where everything went wrong after, the fire.
Right, right. So from the beginning, the investigation struggled. I mean, we're talking about a place that's burned to a crisp, right? So
Oh,
what kind of
yeah.
evidence do you have to go on? You certainly don't have forensic evidence. You have evidence of a fire. You're not going to have fingerprints, DNA. We'll get into more of that later, but from the beginning, it was a very challenging crime scene. There were dozens of leads, but they weren't, cohesive. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious activity earlier that evening, and they had like descriptions of various men, but they weren't very helpful. It was like a guy with long hair, someone in a camouflage jacket. Like it could
Yeah.
have
I
been
mean,
anyone.
it could have been anyone. And police did collect physical evidence as they could, things that don't burn. So shell
Right,
casings, bullet fragments, surprisingly, rope and clothing was left, enough that they could gather it. But
right.
remember, this is back in 1991. So, like you said, DNA. I mean, there's a problem
Yeah.
innately because it's not at all what it is today.
Right. And so they had to go, old school. They interviewed over 50 people. And, they were really trying to get everything they could, pounding the pavement, asking questions, getting witness statements. And it wasn't until 1999, so 8 years after the murders, that 4 people were arrested. So they had all been teenagers at the time of the murders, and they were arrested and charged with murder. So we have 4 suspects that came out.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing though. There was no physical evidence tying any of these boys, I'll call them because they were teenagers at the time,
Yeah.
any of them to the crime scene. There were no fingerprints, there was no DNA. The case seemed to be built entirely on confessions. And those confessions were obtained just hours after police interrogation. They didn't have lawyers present. So, it's a
Yeah.
little shaky.
Right. And the confessions are not like enough to tie it with the physical corroboration of like what happened. Like they're um it's just complicated. I know, we'll get into more of what happened, but the 4 people who were arrested were Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Wellborn. Again, they had all been teenagers in 1991, but this is 8 years later. And so Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were the only 2 who ended up, going to trial, and they were both convicted. Scott in 2002 and Springsteen in 2001. But guess what, Susan?
What, Claire?
Those convictions did not last.
Oof. God bless the Court of Appeals.
Right.
Yeah. So here's where the legal collapse happened. So by 2008, the case against Scott and Springsteen, they completely unraveled. New DNA testing found male DNA on one of the victims, which is super surprising
Yeah.
considering the all the adversity in this scene from the get go with the fire. And that DNA didn't match any of the four men, not Scott, not Springsteen, not Pierce, not Wellborn, who, Pierce and Wellborn hadn't been tried.
Right.
So, I mean, there was nothing to tie them.
Right. And remember, this was supposed to be a group crime. So you would think if there's DNA on the victims and it's male DNA, it's going to match at least one, if not, is not multiple contributors of the four people that they've arrested. And, two of them have confessed, right? Surely it's going to be their DNA. But none of it matched. So if not them, then who was it?
Yeah, in 2009, so prosecutors dismissed the charges. The men were released. Springsteen and Scott had spent nearly a decade behind bars, which just seems so terrible and unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, horrible, horrible for them, for their families. But they were released.
Right. And to this day, no one else has ever been arrested. So the case is technically still open, but there haven't been any significant leads, publicly disclosed at least, in over a decade.
Yeah. So, I mean, Claire, what do you think went wrong here?
Man. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And I've talked to investigators on this case, with Austin Police Department, and it really haunts them. Like they want to solve it. But it's one of those situations where you wish you could go back in time and just do things differently. Because once these four men were like considered, oh, this is a group murder, they did this. Um, that was really all that they looked at that time. And, false confessions, although rare, they do happen. And in this case, with the DNA not matching, it really seems like just wasted time on those four men, who each described the crime differently, by the way. So there
Mm,
wasn't like a
yeah.
consistent story. Um, you know, I I really wish that back in 1991, right, we had some security cameras in the
Mhm.
yogurt shop that we could see. I mean, I wish that we could look back at customer records, receipts. Where do we know who was all going in and out of that shop? I know that they attempted to find all of this, but it's like it's so hard when you just think it's a regular Friday night. And, these are teenagers like working in a yogurt shop. This is not like a high security um, location or anything. So, yeah, it was a really challenging case. I think, you know, they had they had a lot working against them, especially with the fire, destroying a lot of the evidence. But yeah, I still have hope that something with this case could break loose. I know Austin has never forgotten it. And yeah, hope springs eternal.
It does. I mean, it's so I mean, they should have known right then and there when everyone gave a different story, that
Right.
this wasn't the group. I'd love to know how they even found these four people in the first place.
I think it was based on the descriptions, the long hair and the camouflage and people who
Mm,
were known to frequent the yogurt shop. I think there might have been some connection to at least one of the people working there.
I see.
And yeah, you look back at um something like that and you just think, wow, those four people just got wrapped up in something that they actually had nothing to do with. And thank goodness that the DNA eventually, the technology caught up and they were able to say that this doesn't match anyone. And no matches have, been found since in national databases. I think that's probably the best possible lead, is that they still have this DNA. And as more people, are tested and come into the system through various, through law enforcement or through like 23andMe,
Mm,
Ancestry.com,
yeah.
um, that something's going to match up one day. Um, but people have always thought that this was um, a personal crime. And I don't know, like part of me it feels like if it was personal, they would have solved it already, you know? I'm
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
going down like the serial killer, the idea that it was like a
A random.
yeah, it was random, was not related. Maybe they had just been scoping the place out and they saw the girls working there and, that kind of thing. But, it's definitely an unsolved mystery.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it's a puzzle. I mean, it's too many missing pieces,
Yeah.
pieces that don't quite fit, and it sounds like not a lot of movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going on the serial killer vein, there's a serial killer named Kenneth McDuff, who was active in Texas, and he was actually out on parole at the
Mm.
time of this quadruple murder.
Who lets a
But
serial killer out on parole, by the
I
way?
know I don't think they knew that he was a
Oh,
serial killer
oh,
yet.
okay, okay. Wow, before
It's
the title. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've actually seen that quite a bit in my work, in true crime where, they have this really dangerous person, this killer, and they don't the law enforcement doesn't realize that they're a murderer. They think that, they're just like a low-level criminal. They're doing, theft things, or they're stealing cars or
Yeah,
breaking into buildings, which is bad, don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
they let them out on on parole. They give them off, get them off early with time for good behavior, and they're going out and killing people in between these their sentences for petty theft. And people don't know the full story for many years. So yeah, but obviously the DNA did not match Kenneth McDuff. So there you
right.
go. Is it? I mean, with situations like that, you wonder, like, is that DNA like relevant to the crime? Like, it seems it would be,
I
but
was just gonna
yeah.
say, they interacted with people. They were
Yep.
probably touching money, handing
Yep.
out like it was 1991. So like, yeah, there are a number of reasons anyone's DNA could be in that yogurt shop, unrelated to the murders.
Yes. Yeah, it's so sad to think that um all these years later, these families don't have answers. And um I hope that as technology advances, it seems like
Mhm,
that's the answer here. Like that's really what to put our hope in, because at this point, with 30 years past, memories fade, people die. I mean, 30 years, a
mhm.
lot of
Yeah,
the people, involved even investigating this are probably getting up in years, if not retirement.
yeah,
Um
yeah.
so yeah, I'm putting my hope in technological advances to match this DNA up. And maybe it'll be one of those situations where the DNA hits, and then it's like the other puzzle pieces emerge, right? Because then
Right.
you're able to get the history of this person, and you can find out, was it random? Was there a connection? But
That's
without
right.
that, it just seems like it's too many missing pieces.
Yeah, and the case is still considered open, right?
Right. Yeah. And it goes into the cold case unit and it gets fresh eyes. I know I like worked on an anniversary story about it when I was at 48 Hours on CBS. That would have been probably like 2015, 2016. So, they keep coming back to it. No one has forgotten this story, at least, not in Texas. It's these young girls that had a future ahead of them, and we're just trying to make some money in a part-time job at a yogurt shop.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's tragic.
you know,
Oh,
yeah,
horrible.
it's so tragic.
Yeah. I mean, as they say, justice delayed is justice denied. So I hope these families can get answers one day.
Yes, yes. And yeah, we will definitely keep you posted um if we get any new information. The yogurt shop murders remains one of the most haunting cold cases in Texas history. And people are asking, for answers in this case. And I definitely could see it as one. Gosh, this could be a future Final Days on Earth, Susan. We could do a whole
It
season on this
could.
one.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of twists and turns, we
Yep.
didn't get into. So totally.
Right. I mean, well, you have these whole, you have trials of two people that
Yeah.
end up being
Yeah.
overturned. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's rare in and of itself. But we hope that someone out there does know something. Like you always say, there's no statute of limitations on homicide. So
That's right.
let's go. Let's get some information for the sake of those innocent 4 girls. We hope really that justice won't be pending much longer.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Justice Pending. And if you have any information about this case or another one you think we should cover, please reach out to us on our website, justicepending.com.
And if you found the story compelling, please share it, talk about it. The cases only really stay cold when no one cares.
That's right. And we'll be back next week with an all new story where we're still looking for answers. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, and stay tuned. Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanama, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air. Thanks for joining us.